Sorry. Thank you. Board. What's up? Good evening. It couldn't be more of a contrast. This was very colorful. This is going to be very black and white, and it's all about gravity. And these guys had no gravity whatsoever. And my next talk is all about gravity. First and foremost, thank you, Ed and Ines, for insisting. I was invited here 3 years ago, and I said, gladly, I'll come back to Hong Kong, and then I was really sick. And it wasn't one of those sicknesses when you're trying to avoid something. I really was sick. I had pneumonia for 2 weeks, and it wasn't funny, so thanks for insisting. 3 years ago, I would have given you probably a talk about all the great stuff that I've done that Dominic just mentioned, because I was in the middle of retiring. Now I am properly retired, which means I'm busier than ever. And we've been doing some, retired meaning, well, retired, it means you're tired again, in a way. In my case, it means I'm doing shit, I'm not getting paid for it, which is actually a bad idea. Don't do this at home. I wasn't quite sure what we were doing at the time. It was, I'd been collecting old printing presses over time, and they sort of came to me. People found out, and then you have to store them and find space for them. But eventually, I realized that what we were doing was not anti-digital, but we were stepping back and looking at what we actually do as designers. We are in the craft business. I mean, we make things. Some of them may be virtual, as you just saw, things that don't really exist except on the screen or in our minds. But sometimes, and most of the time, we make things that actually do exist, that weren't there before, whether they're physical objects or on the screen or whatever. And I think there is, even though I get this from my mother and my father, that said, if you do something, you do it as well as you possibly can. Otherwise, don't bother doing it. Even if you make a cup of tea, make it as well as you can. Don't cut corners. Don't buy the replacement sugar, and don't get the cheap honey. Make it well. And that's a lesson I think we all designers should listen to every now and again. And we have this new craft, I guess, which now we call post-digital printing, and I shall explain as we go along. There's a more popular version called Hacking Gutenberg. Gutenberg, the inventor of printing with movable type. We know that printing was invented in Asia, of course, way before Gutenberg, but he invented the method of taking type and reassembling it and reusing it. So we're hacking him as it were. We're also doing preservation through production, meaning all the printing presses that I have collected over the last years do exist in museums, but they all got a red line around them saying do not touch. So they're useless. They are like cars without engines in them or bicycles without chains. They are totally useless to be looked at, but not to be used. We use our equipment, and that's how you preserve it. This is, we have 2 locations in Berlin. This is as it were, the workshop where people come in and hang out, I guess. We have some of the equipment that I've collected over the last few years. They're all in use. We print those posters in the background just to make a bit of money, because as I said, I have no other income. That is very colorful here. This is all day glow stuff, and sometimes it's impossible to portray, but this is really colorful there, which does it justice. So we have a little shop that nobody knows about because we're in the backyard and people come by now and again. We, of course, make excellent espresso, no paper cups. Life is way too short to drink coffee out of paper cups, by the way. It's one of my main gripes that I make myself very unpopular when I'm in the USA and I insist on a porcelain cup and they all look at me, huh? Who's this funny guy? Like they forgot that once years ago in China, they invented China. People don't even realize that it's called China because of that reason. I call them, if I say China in America, I don't know what I mean. I have to say porcelain. Too bad. So that's our little cafe, and of course we make our own espresso, we roast our own espresso. That was a naming process that took about 2 seconds, because you do letterpress and you make espresso. I didn't need a design thinking process for that. No post-its were killed in the process. It was very quick. At our other location, we have these gigantic machines that are the size of a room. We'll get to one of them later. And this is the only time where I bother you with a bit of sound, the sound the machines make. If I can get the video to work, mind you. It's just funny, you travel the world and everybody has the same standard, but then they don't. So I'll bring a PDF here and it's different from the PDF I had in Berlin, somehow. It must be jet lagged or something. It wouldn't run on their computer, so it runs on my computer now. Doing this sort of stuff means you have to collect old stuff. So we collect alphabets, we collect presses, we collect all sorts of equipment. You collect metal type with funny German characters, for example. But then it's funny, then you look at this stuff and you walk outside and it happens to be the alphabet that somebody designed for the Berlin street signs 90 years ago. So you make these discoveries, stuff that officially doesn't exist. And I know all of you, I admire all of you because you can read kanji, you can read Chinese, which is the most complex thing in the universe for me. And we have this simple alphabet in the Latin alphabet, which is a piece of cake. I mean, 26 characters. I mean, you can learn it in 10 minutes. But then these guys go and, if you spoke German, you'd get this. They cut complete words into wood to make it quicker. This is almost like kanji, one word on one letter. And I collect those because they're weird and wonderful and totally useless. And then over time you realize, this is wood type or different materials. Every size is cut differently because people who made it had their own idea or they didn't know what the designer wanted. So every time I find a new size of these typefaces, they're slightly different. So there's no master plan, and it's quite random. They were quite advanced in the day. This is from 1927, give and take. They used resin, a material, well, these days you would probably have MDF or something. And they were these are hand cut by women, but mostly, by the way, because women tend to be better at this delicate stuff. Amazing materials that is almost impossible to reproduce these days. And we use it to print posters. Actually, this is actually not my motto at all anymore. And I think people are already thinking about this twice. The motto for Silicon Valley was always move fast and destroy things or whatever. They realized, what is it called? Yeah, move fast and break things. Now realize they've broken too much. Because now the world is in turmoil, as we know, and not just in the USA, but there especially. Because just breaking things is no alternative. You also have to make things. It's easy to write software that breaks other things, but to actually make something that makes our life better is something else. So I somehow regret it. Now, of course, having that physical stuff there means one way to preserve it by digitizing it. So we're digitizing some of the alphabets because the ones we have physically do wear over time. And mind you, so does digital data, but that's another topic. And you find stuff like this. I mean, this is what people think letterpress should be like. I disagree. I think letterpress should be clean and crisp. But if we have people come into the workshop, do letterpress, they want it to be dirty and show the signs of wear. But you have two-color characters here, and you have stuff that you can't read, that only I can read for once, the German characters, which, by the way, go way back. Can you read that? Beer is, well, of course you can. Even though that Y is not a Y. I mean, beer is made by men, but wine by God. Martin Luther, you've heard of him. He's the German one, the original one, not the American one. He's been dead for 500 years. But he started the Reformation, and the Reformation wouldn't have happened without printing. Because if it hadn't been any printing, he would have nailed his theory on the church in Wittenberg, and nobody would have cared about it 2 days later. But it got picked up and printed, and it started a new age in Europe. So that particular, I have to go back, in case you didn't get it. So everybody thinks this is really clever, the word perfect with an E missing. Well, it's not clever. It actually happened because normally when you design for letterpress, because you have large type and you don't have a lot of it, there's only 2 A's and 5 E's and whatever, you have to make a little sketch and count your characters. I didn't do it then. So when I get to the case, I think, oh shit, there's only 4 E's here. So you leave one out. So it's not clever, it's the. Same here. This was actually, my son printed this with Ferdinand, my assistant. They printed 15, went to lunch and came back and saying, something wrong with that word Ditalis. That kind of something is wrong here. It's wrong, but it's a mistake because you look at that type in the form and it kind of, it looks weird. I mean, you can't really read that. I mean, you can read it, but it's not, there's no white there. There's no white space. I mean, there is white space, but it's not white and it's not space. It's filled with stuff. So we've learned by now that people love those mistakes. So we reprint them with the mistakes, which is kind of fake, but if people want to buy the fake reprints, it's fine by me. So this is what it looks like. We don't think about it, but there is stuff in between. There's no such thing as a return key or a forward key or anything here. Collecting also means collecting the old stuff because we have to find out, what we have there. And then in the old stuff, you find the politics. This is a yearbook from 1936. Now, all of you here aren't familiar with the German black type, which these days is all about neo-Nazis and hard rock bands. But what you do find, if you follow those manuals over time, how political our business always has been. 3 years earlier, these would have all been nice Latin Roman faces. Come the mid-30s, there is, there's this Hitler guy, and maybe we better be in with him because, we might get favors from the government. So they're starting doing all this German type. Suddenly in 45, it's gone, there's no kids in Germany called Adolf anymore for good reason. That name died out in one day from the 8th of May to the 9th of May, 45. I'm sure those stories, I think the name Donald will die out in America very quickly if it hasn't already done so. Nobody must be called Don anymore, or maybe they call them Nald or something or whatever. That would be a name for you guys, Tin and Nald or Nald, whatever. And we find weird equipment. This is a vacuum cleaner. One of those machines that sucks when they don't. And you have these guys, always in white overcoats, who go and take type from the cases and there's a little grid in there, so the dust comes out, but the type doesn't, and you can put it back. People invent that stuff, and I have 2 of those, and they're like, I can probably pretend they're robots. People would think they're robots. They look like it. They're great, and they're always sort of gray-green, this Hammerite ink, which is fantastic. So there's a history of designers and lab coats. This is the total aside. We've been collecting them, so one day we thought, okay, we can do this. So we had our lab coats made with our logo on there, and everybody said, look serious. We look worried, actually. I'm not sure whether we look serious, but and everybody has a little piece of equipment. I could spend 2 hours showing you weird pieces of equipment. I won't, except this one, which I found somewhere. Some of you may remember what a type scale was. Yeah. Thank you. Well, I know you're ancient, Sebastian. I know that. Well, you measure shit, right? You still do, even if you have any sort of output. Any 3-dimensional designer here knows what scales are like, what measurements are like. This is the one that I found. It's made from brass, and all these measurements that you have around the shop need to be measured. So there's only one, and it's the only one I've ever seen, and nobody else knows another one. So we redid it, because we have a laser, so we cut it in plexiglass, in Perspex. And now you can buy it or give it free if you're a friend, because it's a very useful tool. I can guess most of those things, but I'm a show-off. If you're not a show-off, you actually want to measure and make sure that what you have, this is it. Because if you use the material, you have to put it back in the cases, and there's nothing worse than people. It's like nuts and bolts. You put in the wrong nuts and the wrong bolts in the wrong boxes. It's a nightmare. So we make these little tools, and this next department is to teach you some German. German words, as Mark Twain said, are so long they have perspective. This is the short one, as German goes, Schrifthöhenmessgerät. It means Schrift is type, Höhe is height, Mess is measuring, and Gerät is gadget, thingy. So it's a gadget to measure the height of type, a caliper. Sebastian and I bought one each yesterday in a shop for 500. Mine was 620 Hong Kong, because we like measuring things. God knows why, but it's nice measuring things. You feel you're in command. You know how big things are, how small things are, as it were. And we have, of course, the Gummidrucktuch Spezialdickenmesser, which is a really important gadget. Now, gummi is gummy, rubber. Drucktuch is the cover of a cylinder. on a printing press. Spezial means special, special. Everything is special because it's, not ordinary. And dicken means thickness, and it's a measuring device to measure the thickness of rubber blankets or paper, as it were. It goes down to a hundredth of a millimeter. Very important, lovely word just for you. You could also call it Spezialdickenmesser für Gummidrucktücher, as it says on the dial there, but we prefer that long word. We would have had a longer one, but as you can see, we run out of space on the screen there. That's why Germans, I don't know, I never know. I mean, is Chinese, the Chinese alphabet, does it all make you philosophers because it's so complex? Or are you so complex because the alphabet is? Are Germans or engineers because of our language, because it's so modular, or is our language modular because we're all born engineers? I don't know, but we certainly, German is a very modular language. You can make any word out of any other word. You can combine 100 words if you want to, and I can read it. Not my poor American wife, because she doesn't know where one word ends and the other one starts. That's the secret. It's like a brick wall. Once you know where the gaps are, you know they're actually bricks. But to you all, it might just look like one piece of stone. We teach. We have letterpress workshop, partly because it's fun and partly because it earns the rent. And you get serious, even older people. You can't get them out at night. I mean, they're there, getting their hands dirty. Or the wimps wear rubber gloves here. Real men don't, of course, wear those. And we do research. We manufacture type. We try and, which is totally impractical. I just told you, there's never enough characters in there. And it's always the wrong size. So why do we make more of it? There's no answer. It's fun to try this out. So there's all sorts of different materials here, plexiglass and different metals, 3D printing, which works, except it's too expensive. The material is still the price of cocaine, I mean. Not that I don't know the exact market price of cocaine at this moment, but it's very expensive. As well, a bag of 3D powder is like 50 pounds, dollars, euros, whatever. So we've tried all these. And there is, of course, a method called polymer. And it's actually nylon of a sort. And that makes lovely little characters. We'll come to that a little later. But we've also I found some person in Romania, of all places, that cuts my type into, in this case, maple wood, except he's running out of large size of maple. So I give my digital data, and somebody cuts it on the CNC machine. It's pretty straightforward. It's quite precise, not to 100th, but to a 10th of a millimeter. We have to work 100. And then I got this incredible pleasure that I design a typeface, and I have it in one size, and I can print one size with never enough characters on a poster that nobody wants to look at. Sometimes we help friends. This, for example, was for the Hamilton wood type guys in Wisconsin. Don't go there this time of year. It's worse than Berlin. The weather is worse and the food is, Jesus. Don't eat in Wisconsin ever. Well, it's the country of cheese, but they only have one sort, which kind of I find weird. Anyway, they have very old people cutting wood by hand. So I made a typeface for them that has no sharp corners, so that anybody who's a little wobbly and has no eyesight can cut it. So that's called corporate. No, that's not called corporate. What is that called? Special design, I suppose. But it's all done digitally because we're not Luddites. I like the digital work, but instead of giving it to somebody to make a digital font from it, they cut it into materials. We found one material recently that is really, really useful. I'm not sure what it's called in Chinese. I know it's for mica in Sebastian. He has to go to somewhere else. It's not that I've frightened him. For mica, we call it resopal. It's the stuff for kitchen tables, which is chemically resistible, fairly precise, and it's cheap. Way cheaper than maple or oak or anything. And it's available in large 3 by 2 meter plates. So this is our new material. We use it for a project in Italy with our friends at the Tipoteca Italiana. If anybody ever goes to Italy and has any interest in letterpress printing whatsoever, go there. It's just north of Venice. It's insane. Silvio, the owner there, has been collecting machinery for 40 years, and they have everything. It's absolutely insane. He has 3 brothers that pay for it. So we did this project. We cut this type and made posters from it, and then they got exhibited. Silvio printed them at some museum in Venice. I'm only showing this because if you look at the posters and the actual form where the type is in, I think the forms are nicer. I mean, I'm a graphic designer, so I work with white space, but I think the way they're constructed, the way they're made up, for anybody who has any interest in mechanics, I find those forms fascinating. We also publish. The reason we publish is because we want to, because we like to read, and if you read, then you have to have somebody publish stuff, so we publish stuff. It's called paper because it's printed on paper. I don't know, Susanna, how long did that naming take? It involved 7 people and 3 sessions, outside consultants, 5,000 post-it notes. No, it didn't. The first ones were printed on a risograph. You all know what risors are, of course, which are, again, totally stupid machines, made for fast runs, 20,000 an hour, and we print 200. Ridiculous. But we wanted, and now they're letterpress, and this is a particular issue where we wanted to show that there is an American that we all like. I mean, beyond Jimi Hendrix, but there are some, decent things about America, like Levi's jeans and maybe Coca-Cola and maybe Jimi Hendrix, a couple others, I guess. And that was also our vehicle to try out how well we could actually print letterpress. Yes, the common size we have in the studio is, well, Ferdinand Meiss is 2 meters and 3. I'm 176. So this poster looks small, but it's actually 50 by 70. I'm glad I can actually use metric here. In America, I always had to convert to inches, which is weird. The other one, the one I'm holding up, is, well, you can guess the size, right? You'd be surprised how many Americans ask me what the size of that sheet is. It's not inches. This is the one thing we print at our proper shop, and this seems to be a very common movement. When you print something, you have to hold it up against the light to see what the back shines through the register. This is Daniel, our resident printer on the Heidelberg, and there's been this trend, as you know, of late, to make everything look like wood type. So people take perfectly good type and destroy it digitally, which is kind of weird. I mean, digital destruction, digital analog, it's a trend around the world, handwritten, I mean, this is not handwritten, of course. But there are people, I haven't seen it here yet, but I've certainly, here is still very digital, lots of neon digital lights. In Europe and certainly in North America, the handwriting blackboards are back in restaurants. There are people who can do it again or still do it. They write the prices down because if it's handwritten, it's fresh. I mean, the famous example, if you go by a farm and they have a sign printed in Helvetica, fresh eggs, you're going to go buy because they're not fresh, they're printed. But if it's handwritten by the farmer's wife, you'll stop because you think it's fresh. It's stupid, but that's how communication design works. That's what we do for a living, right? So this is weird, and for us, it's the other way. We don't want to print like this, we want to print properly. So we built ourselves a laser setter, which is, don't try this at home. It's totally stupid. It cost a fortune because it didn't exist for some reason. There are laser setters, but nobody has cut into a polymer plate with a metal back for letterpress printing for some reason. And as you can see, it's all totally handmade. This thing is invented by us. It works. It cuts into plates that are 70 by 50 centimeters wide. This is the nylon, which is hardened by the laser and then washed out and all the rest of it. And then we can print 8 pages on one sheet when we print books. Now, why would you print books in letterpress? Because you can. Because the ink is blacker. There's a little touchy feel about it. And because it's preservation through production. We print those books for proper publishers, only 1,000. They're all carefully hand-bound. Because the only way print will survive is by being better than the old print. So we don't need more books, we need better books. We need better printing, we need more physical stuff. There is a trend, I could go on this for the next hour, how people are now printing their photographs because all the clouds are disappearing, or Flickr doesn't support you anymore, and we all have 50,000 photographs in the cloud, but we don't know where the fuck the cloud is. Does it even exist? So people are printing books again, so they have their photographs. So paper is far from dead. This is the country, by the way, they invented paper, right? Ceylon was the guy, as I remember. How long ago was that? In the 400s, about 1,500 years ago. And then it traveled to Europe. It took 1,000 years to get to us. great being here where everything was invented. Fantastic. So we print those books because we can, and we pay for our machines and for our development, and they don't look too much different. We set them on the Macintosh. We make normal typography, and then we print them on letterpress, and you can, if I had the books here, I could show you. I have something else here in a minute. And we do like this Kickstarter project with Luis Rosetto, an old friend of mine, the founder of Wired magazine. We printed 1,500 books in letterpress, and it's a story from one of the pioneers of the digital explosion in the 90s. And of course, it's very ironic, and it doesn't escape us, that we would print this in the oldest printing process ever. And it was very successful because people liked the tactile quality. And then I had another stupid idea, because with this gigantic press there, that's, as you've seen, prints 130 by 96 centimeters or 1,300 millimeters wide. And we have this, one of the many online services, it'd be like Vox or whatever, that has a little online newspaper every morning. And I told them, why don't we print an issue for you every quarter, every month? Because we have this press. And they said, this is totally stupid. I mean, why would you want to print it? I said, well, because we have the press. Okay, fair enough. So we print the Krautreporter, which, because it's German, on this machine from 1924, which took 6 years to restore. It's a hell of a bitch. It is, as you can see, it's, it needs men, real people. It's hard work. And it took us a few years to figure out how everything works. Everything works. Everything has a purpose. In the middle there, well, I can't show you in the middle there. I'll show you the middle. Middle is in the middle. See that little wire thingy there, which looks like a coat hanger? It was making a noise, and we thought, oh, to hell with that thing. Take it away. It's making this horrible noise. Well, the machine stops because there's a little hole under it, and if there's no sheet of paper going in, this little wire falls into that hole, touches the little lever, which has the big lever, and another lever, and stops the flywheel, which is this size. It's a safety device. If there's no paper, it would damage the cylinder, so it stops. It's so mechanical and so incredible, and it took us a long time to figure out. I think it's a total miracle, and somebody had to do it. So here we make 4 plates, and we print this incredible newspaper, which I have here, which is incredibly stupid and large, and nobody needs it, but we're printing it. Okay, so you can, it's perforated, you can tear it apart and take it home, and it's very unpractical, and it reads like it did in the old days. It's so-called long read, and you can take it home, and you can wrap your fish in it, or light your fire with it. It has a secondary usage. It never runs out of storage. There is no cloud for it, and if nothing else, you light your fire with it. And that's my sort of motto, and that's I guess my wish for everybody here, that we need more craft, because even a computer programmer has a craft. He makes things properly. Of course, being a doctor is a craft. You have to do it really well. Being a parent is something we all don't learn, we learn over time or by mistake, as it were. And citizens, we need to learn to make things and to hang out with each other and to make, as it were, a better world. And I am totally convinced, and you probably, I hope most of you would agree with me, that something that has been made by people, which also means it's made by a few people, even if you touch a knife and somebody made the blade, somebody made the handle, somebody cut it, somebody put it together, it's all been touched by many hands. And I strongly believe, and that's the message for the sort of post-digital world, as it were, because digital is a given now, that the things that we make do carry the message of their process with them. A meal well cooked by somebody is different from a meal that you pick out of some factory or other. We all know it, we've all been to it, and I think now is the time where digital has reached its peak. It's going to be there forever, but we are going back to maybe looking more closely at our physical work. There is gravity, there is color, not in my world, but that's basically is my message, and if I can do it now, I'll leave you with a video of this stupid machine. Oh, shit, see? I knew it was going to happen. Oh, fuck. Sorry, I wasn't going to swear, but... okay. Thank you very much. I'm done for this. You can go now. It's only 5 minutes. Oh, I need that. Thank you very much.
It's a bit like that. We're nearly there.
You can almost go home.
We're nearly there. We're nearly there. Actually, before I ask a question, watching that video, what prompted me was thinking about the smell of the inks. Is that something that you still find a sensory experience as part of the process?
Yeah. One thing you have to also tell everybody when they do workshop, you have to stop an hour before you stop, because you have to clean up.
Yes.
You have to clean the ink, which is not always pleasant, but yes, the smell, the mix of paper and ink and solvent may not be sexy, but it's certainly part of it. You certainly know where that you work in, and I always have dirty fingernails.
So is it true you had a printing press when you were growing up or as a teenager in the basement of the house? How did that come about? Is that what brought this love of typography about?
I won't.
Was that just paying your way through?
It's a long story. I won't bore you with it. But I did have. I was going to be a printer when I came out of university, and then I moved my press to London, and it burned down. And there's obviously some god who says, oh, letterpress being wait another 30 years or 40 years. And then I became a graphic designer because all you needed at that time was a pencil. These days, all you need is a computer, but it's an easy, anybody can pick it up. I never trained as a graphic designer. Don't tell anybody. I've been teaching it for 40 years. Oops. Sorry.
I was given this quote. You once said typography is incurable but not lethal. What did you mean by that?
No, that's typomania. That's my sickness. I have to read everything, and I have to identify. Before I read, I have to identify the typeface it's set in. Otherwise, I can't read it.
Yeah.
But I mean that if somebody's a chef, they're always tasting things. What's in there: salt, sugar, cinnamon. We all have our occupational diseases, don't we?
Yes.
And for me, it's typomania. Like I said, it's infectious, but it's not. I won't die of it. I'll die of something else. I'll probably fall off my bicycle or something, if I'm lucky.
You also said that everyone puts their history into their work. Is there an example of one of your pieces that perhaps you've done that yourself?
I'm sure all the work. I know I get really annoyed when I see things that are shoddily made and with a disregard to the user. And I remember going around foreign cities. I remember being here first in the early 90s. And of course, it's both a pleasure and a nightmare to be here I can read things because there's English, but I go to Beijing or go to the outskirts of Tokyo and I can't read anything. Makes you acutely aware of the role of information design. And I've always started doing things. I did a lot of work for the German Post Office, for the German Railways, because their stuff annoyed me so much that I kept writing them saying, you assholes, this stuff is so bad. And then finally they got me the job to do it because they wanted me to shut up. Because, for hell's sake, Spiekermann, get out of here. Here's money, do it, and get lost. Which is one way to get work, I guess.
Well, there's a question from the audience. Do you still hate Helvetica?
I never hated Helvetica. That's rubbish. No, you can't hate a typeface. It's a typeface. It's innocent. No, I hate it. No, I don't hate. I don't like. I don't think I've ever hated any. I hate some people, yes, for good reason. I won't go there. I already said certain names will die out soon. I never like the attitude where people use something out of laziness, which is fine. I'm as lazy as the next person, but then make a philosophy out of it. I know people who use Helvetica because they can't be bothered to look at something else, which is fine. But they say, oh, we're using it because the modern world and the neutrality of the objectivity, and they give it all these words, and it's rubbish, and that's lazy. Why not say, I couldn't be bothered to think of something else? That's fine. I appreciate that. But saying, I use Helvetica because it embodies my philosophy, does it, hell? It embodies your lack of work. There.
Since you're not...
Not that I'm opinionated, but...
Well, that's perfect. That's a great segue to my next question, because since you do, you're not shy in putting your opinions forward, what's your view on this whole modern kind of UX, UI designer syndrome that's going on?
Which particular one are you talking about?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I have my, I mean,
I haven't figured out the difference as an industrial designer. I've always designed for my users. So.
Yeah, my augmented reality thing, I'm kind of like, my reality is already so augmented. I need less of it. I don't need walk around with goggles to look at shit that I don't want to look at in the first place. And I don't want to be like a fish underwater. I'm happy with my environment. I love going around a place like Hong Kong where everything is new and different, and I get amazing smells, and it's a little dangerous, and it's nice to see how people still queue up as the Brits used to do by the bus stops. And why would I need goggles to transport myself to Hong Kong when I'm in Berlin or vice versa? It's going here. It's just nothing like the physical experience. So the other thing I don't like about UX, no, I like UX, UI, whatever it's called these days, experience design even, that is mostly done by very young designers who have never been out into the world. They come out of college, the Royal College, and then they go to Apple in this environment where they get moved in by a bus in the morning, they get the bottoms wiped, they get the laundry done, they get the food served, then they go back home, sleep a bit, and then get the same process. They have never been exposed to the world, but they're designing the world for us, which is very scary. And that scares me more than anything. And they're called experience designer, they have no experience.
They have no experience. Excellent.
It's not a question of age, by the way. It's a question of exposure. You can be an idiot at 100, obviously.
So you write a blog where you talk about many design issues, and in one post you talked about a statement from Jean-Luc Godard, where he says, "Style is the outside of content, and content the inside of style." And I think you have a poster with that quote, do you?
Yes, yeah. Well, Godard, of course, has said many things which are mostly incomprehensible. That one also needs explaining.
But the discussion about style versus content keeps coming up again. So is that?
I never saw the contradiction. How can you have content without style? Everything you see has style, whether it's by default because it's not design, whether it's design.
Yes.
I mean, no style is just as much a style as style is.
Yes.
There's, everything. Was it Prince Philip? I think the Brits said at one time, everything you see was designed by God, essentially, right? I mean, nature. If it wasn't done by a designer, it was designed by God. And so everything is designed, everything has a style. And the content thing, I mean, this content word that there's a few words actually that are already being overused and people are getting wary of them, like content. It's called, text, words, stuff. Content was just invented, the word to invent a content provider, which is nothing else but somebody who writes, for Christ's sake. Why call it content provider?
A question from the audience. What do you think about Japanese typeface and fonts? And I guess if I could extend on that, as you mentioned earlier, obviously the complexity of Chinese characters, even though you may not be able to read it, are you intrigued by the forms? So
I'm totally intrigued, and I also think that your brains work better than ours because you had to learn that stuff. I know there is a system, and there are composites, and you can break it down to maybe a few hundred, and then you add up to, 8,000 that present kanji has. We write, at the moment, me and my ex-colleagues are designing all the type for Mercedes-Benz, and we will also tackle kanji. Most of the work will probably be done in Hong Kong. We'll do the first 200 or 300 characters by a Japanese designer. Wow. I find it fascinating that, to look at, because they are obviously images. Some look, I have to ask you, the men and women toilet, there's 4 kanjis. The last one is men or women, because they're different. The first 3 are the same. What is this? It means the place where you can add or take away water, and then men and then women, or why are there 4 kanji signs for the simple word of men and women? Or is it rude to say toilet or men or women? I'm intrigued, but I find it most beautiful. And the one thing I find the most amazing, both here in China and in Japan, is that you had to invent the very thin pens to write that stuff. I mean, people write this in, I don't know how you do it. And this incredible detail, and you even know what it means. It's just, I am fascinated by it. I admire you for that capability to A, read it, and B, write it. Insane. Not very practical, but...
And another question, which is similar to one I was going to ask you as well, but is it possible to design new typefaces now, given all that has gone before? And I guess, as you mentioned, with 26 characters in the English language, how do you, what inspires you, or where do you get inspiration from to change the subtleties, like you were describing earlier about the rounded corners?
The word is subtlety, yeah. Maybe there's 95% of the alphabet is done. I mean, the A is an A is a B. The 5% is what we thrive on. You could also say, who wants to write more books? We've already, all the books have been written, since Shakespeare almost, We've had James Joyce, and literature could have stopped there. Some people think, and some people believe so also, or it's Shakespeare for that. He wrote all the drama that we ever needed. No, there are 3 reasons to design another typeface. The first one is somebody wants to. There's kids coming out of school now, I want to design a typeface. Okay, they do, and they realize after a few weeks, shit, this is real work. This is not easy. There's 400 characters. It's not just 26 altogether with the accents and stuff. So that's good. It's a good lesson. There is more than black and white. The second one is the technical one still.
Yes.
Media changes, you have lots of pixels here, and all the displays, they all need their own stuff. And the third one is branding.
Yes.
I've designed a lot of typefaces for companies, like now for Mercedes-Benz. The reason why they're doing it, because their type has to work on the small screens in the car, on the big posters outside, everywhere, and it is their voice.
Right.
And there's no logo, there's no colors, there's no images. You want to sense, I am in a Mercedes-Benz environment, or Bank of Hong Kong environment, or whatever. And it's very subtle, but it's just like music. I mean, it's 8 notes.
Yes.
We can still tell the difference. So it's the sound, the rhythm, the frequency, the stuff in between. So type has just as many variations as music does. And nobody's going to say we're going to stop writing music after Mozart.
Yes.
It goes on, and it's an incredible repertoire out of 8 notes. So
those subtleties, if we're talking about Mercedes-Benz, for instance, and to a non-typographic person, where do you start? How can you express part of the brand through those letter forms? Is it?
Well, in that case, we had a precedent. Maybe an easier one is Audi, which we did maybe now 20 years ago. They wanted sort of horizontal speed and manly kind of stuff, which I think is a very stupid brief, but okay, it's a brief. So they got a manly, squarish, typeface.
Yes.
So Mercedes-Benz they have 2. They have one with serifs and one without.
Yeah.
The serifs one is the brand that's
Yes.
130 years old, and the sans serif one is the technical one. So that mix alone makes that voice.
Right.
So there's always something else. You'd be surprised. I'm always surprised myself.
This is a funny question for you. Well, first I should read it out the way it's written. Very inspiring. Thank you, Erik. What is your retirement plan next? I think retirement 2.0. Is that someone that knows you?
We seriously have this year, and my wife is my witness. If in 2019 we don't get some sort of public subsidy or money, we have to close the shop down, because it's costing a lot of money paying rent for all this stuff. We do sell things, but basically it's a very expensive hobby, and I'll be running out of money next year. So that's the plan. If anybody has $1 million lying around that they need for a good purpose, I would give you a receipt, and you can come and print until the cows come home. Now we seriously need some public project or some money or some museum funds, whatever. So if you know anybody who wants to invest in letterpress printing in Berlin, you're more than welcome. That's the plan for next year. Otherwise, make more shit, Stuff, sorry.
So looking back on your career, you've obviously done an amazing body of work. The redesigning of The Economist is obviously something that's pretty significant. But what do you see yourself, obviously as the biggest achievement?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and I'm glad I have answers for it. The ideal thing for any of us designers, obviously, is that you do something that is both useful for mankind, is beautiful, makes people's lives better and nicer, and gets paid for. Like, for example, when the 2 Germanys got reunited in 89, 90, I'd been quoting these guys for years because the stuff was so horrible, the signage, passenger information, that finally they came to me in 1990 and said, okay, we now have 2 cities that join together that don't know anything about each other. Why don't you design us the passenger information system for the reunited Berlin? I got paid for it. And it looks good even now after 25 years, and it's useful. That's the ideal project for any of us. I mean, you would all dream to do that, to get paid for something that makes your own environment better. For example, The Economist. I mean, it's only a newspaper, not necessarily maybe my political views all the time, but the best client ever, because they're all professional journalists there, and they recognize me as a professional designer. We had no discussion about design. I said, you're a designer, we need this, but whether it's blue, red, or green, we don't care. Large or small, we don't care. Design it for us, we give you, famously, the content. So those clients, I mean, and they pay you for being in meetings with bright people.
Yes.
Fantastic. I would have done it for nothing, but don't tell them. We just did it again last year.
Really?
After 18 years now, yeah.
And maybe just to finish off on another controversial question, I like this one, so I'm going to read it out. What typeface would you use to type Donald Trump?
For Comic Sans, of course.
Fantastic. What a great way to finish.
No.
Erik, a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
It's
Thanks,
been great
Dominic.
having you.
And give him a big hand. He's been working hard all day. It's very difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic.